All right, everybody, welcome to SewTime February 2023. We want to welcome everybody in the wonderful live audience, as well as all of you in virtual land. So, with that said, I want to make just a couple announcements because I want to be fair to this group and all of you. We have Urban Zunt coming March 10th and 11th. We may have 3 spots left now. We're keeping it to 20 people. This is going to be a fantastic workshop on embroidery, lace, and fabric painting by one of the most celebrated and one of the most talented embroidery artists in the world, who's flying in from Switzerland to be with us. That's March 10th and 11th. Do not miss this opportunity. Also, only for SewTime members are we telling people this. We have 10 only spots for his trunk show for those of you who are not signed up for his workshop. We did make that announcement to the previous group. We only have a couple spots left. It's Friday night, the 10th at 6:30 p.m. He's going to be doing a trunk show right here. The cost, if you're not doing the workshop, is just $10 to attend. So, without further ado, we want to start this February SewTime. And we are fortunate to have Mo Pfister, and she's going to tell you what she's going to be doing, because I just usually make a mess of it. But thank you all for tuning in. Oh, by the way, Mo will also tell you we're going to be doing separate drawings today for you out in virtual land. If you like us or make a comment, you're automatically entered into the free prize drawing that will get in touch with you after the event today. Although for you here, you all have a ticket and your drawing will be separate because you're live here. So there we go.
There we go.
Okay, here's Mo. Bye, everyone.
Get this turned on. Okay, everyone. I'm here today to talk about binding and a few other things. But what I do hope is that I'm not too random. And take a look at my shining face right now if you're in virtual land, because most of this presentation is going to be done on a close-up camera, because I really want to show you the details of what I'm talking about when we're discussing binding. Okay, and so without further ado, I'm going to have Eddie switch to the close-up camera and talk a little bit about what, oh wait, one up. Oh. Do we see this banner here behind me? This is going to be a class we're doing coming up. It is, all of this lettering is embroidered. And if you look at it and it sparkles a little bit, it's not because we used metallic thread, it's because we used mylar. And the mylar has an opalescence to it that gives that effect like maybe you used metallic thread. The class we're going to do the word sew, not the word quilt, or we would be here for a couple of weeks because every letter takes quite a while to stitch out. But if you like the idea and want to join the class, maybe you're doing one letter on a pillow, or maybe you want to do the back of clothing or something along that lines, please sign up. It's going to be a fun class. And with that said, the tip I have, while I was preparing and doing this banner, is I saw this online and thought it was fun. But this isn't only a banner. If you flip to the back, I did it envelope style like you would a pillow. So I can hang this on the wall as a wall hanging, or put it down on a table as a table runner, or it has an opening in the back that I could slide a pillow in and turn it into a bench pillow. So that's my new trick with any table runner I'm doing, is leave an opening in the back. You could insert a pillow and all of a sudden it's something different. So that's my tip on table runners. So now we're coming into the close-up view. And you're gonna see, here is the product that I used. It's by Pearly Gates. It's an embroidery design that is called the Mylar Floral Monogram. And for those who want to buy it, you all have a price sheet, or make note of it, that this is something you want to get. I think on the table right now, the morning group bought it. So make note that that's something you want to purchase, and we can get those back in the store within the week. I'm going to be offering a class in this, and the class is going to be on March 18th. It's a Saturday. And so from 10 to 2 on March 18th, we're going to be doing Mylar monograms. Okay, and so now I'm going to move on to the next exciting thing that we're working on. The next thing I'm working on is jelly roll rugs. Okay, we know that when you do a jelly roll rug, you do miles and miles and miles of this prepping your jelly roll strip. And so with the jelly roll strip, you're putting in a piece of batting and 2.5-inch strip of fabric, and then you fold it, press it, sew it, press it, press it, press it, press it. And the tip I'm going to teach you today is how to take one of those steps out. You're going to take one pressing step away. And that is going to make everybody just get so excited, because we all know prepping a jelly roll is challenging. So first I'm going to talk about your binding. When we're doing a jelly roll, rug, jelly roll placemat, jelly roll anything, you want to have a 2.5-inch or a 2.25-inch strip of batting and the fabric, a 2.5-inch also strip of fabric. Many of us have a lot of batting sitting around our house that we think, if I could just cut those into strips, I'd be happy. I'll do that. But the one thing you don't want to do is add bulk in your seam when you're folding it over. So you don't want to sew that batting together, or you're creating bulk with a seam. So the product I use is Gentle Touch by OESD. And this is that poly nylon type of fabric that you press onto the back of an embroidery design so that it doesn't scratch your skin, something you use when you're finished with a project. But it also is wonderful for fusing together your batting. So if I put these two pieces of batting together and lay down a piece of this Gentle Touch, I think Floriani calls it Dream Weave. Everybody has a name for it, but every embroidery sell it. And I iron that in place. Look, I have this and it's nice and smooth. We don't have a seam. And typically I do it to both sides, just so I know it's not going anywhere and I can manipulate this 2.5-inch strip exactly as I want to. And now I have this continuous 2.5-inch, and it allows me to use up all my scraps. A lot of times we send our quilts out to the quilters and we end up with all this batting left over. And now you have an opportunity to use that. I save it for mug rugs. I save it for doing this type of a work. So the next thing that happens when you're doing a jelly roll rug, typically you go and fold your fabric in half, and then you're going to fold inside and fold inside and fold and fold and fold, right? It goes on forever, the folding and the pressing. What we have here, I want to show you, this is the coolest thing ever. So make sure you can see. This is a tool that is put out by Clover. That's called the Fabric Tube Maker. This is awesome. Here's the Fabric Tube Maker. It actually comes in 4 parts. Okay, I'm going to take the larger part. I pick up my fabric and I feed it into this first segment. Maybe I use a stiletto or whatever to feed that fabric through for the first time. And when I get it out and get it organized and set up, see how I got it? It's coming out. Looks good. This piece comes in and snaps it into place. So I come in, hear that snap? Snapped it into place. The next thing I do is grab piece number 2. I feed it through. And again, take this piece. I'm going to snap it into place. And now this is all that has to happen. And once I have miles of jelly roll strips sewn together, right? I have all my continuous batting strips ready to go. All I need to do is give this a pull, give this a pull, and go straight to my sewing machine and sew. So what did I do? I just eliminated that first pressing that you have to do. You don't have to iron these. You go straight from this tool to your machine. Give yourself more slack, line it up, put it under the needle in either direction, whichever way is gonna work going under your needle, and sew that down in place. You're gonna have it, it's gonna be perfect. Look at this. Here's when I've finished. It's perfect and ready to go. So it's gonna make creating those strips for jelly roll, rugs, placemats, anything perfect. And then once you have that all sewn down in place, then we're gonna come back and press, okay? So again, this is called the Fabric Tube Maker, and oh my gosh, it's awesome. The Jelly Roll Rug class is April 15th, and that's a Saturday from 10 to, I think, well, 10 to whenever. When the store closes, you gotta go home. But the, we will send an email to people who are going to come to the class, because you can make a decision. Are you going to do this process in class? Do you want to do it at home first because you're more interested in learning about how to actually get that jelly roll sewn and worked through? So we're gonna give maybe 3 options. These are 3 stages you could come prepared. And you just choose, it doesn't matter, because both Laura and I will be here, and we will guide you through creating jelly rolls or whatever. You can bring any type of jelly roll project you want to work on. We're here to make it happen. So that's gonna be a really fun class in April. All right. And look at, I'm just so impressed by this tool. I can't tell you enough. Now, today's topic is truly about binding. So you have a quilt. You've already gone through and done your quilting. You've made decisions about how you're putting your sandwich together, whether you're basting or pinning or however that happens. I do have, if you're running low on your KK2000, we have bottles of KK2000 here. But we're going to talk for a moment about what type of binding do you want to do for your project. And there's maybe 3 choices, there may be more, but 3 choices are, am I going to hand sew the back of that binding down? Am I going to machine sew that binding down? And the other one is, do I want to use bias binding or do I want to use straight of grain binding? And I'm going to start by explaining what I mean there. When I cut a piece of fabric, salvage to salvage, I have cut straight of grain. And what that means is all the thread is running in one direction, straight up and down. If I were to catch a piece of thread and snag it, that thread can work its way out and it's going to run the whole distance of that piece of fabric. So if you cut 22 inches, if you cut 44 inches, you run the risk of that thread getting broken away from your project that whole distance. When you cut bias, you're actually cutting on the bias of the fabric. So the thread length is the width of your fabric. So if you cut a bias strip 2.5 inches, all those threads are running 2.5 inches long. So if you snag a thread, it's only coming out that short distance. That makes sense? So majority of the people who are out creating bindings for quilts are traditionally cutting straight of grain. If they're creating a piece that it's going to be heirloom and they really believe it's going to be here 100 years from now, a lot of times they might choose, because bias holds up over a long time better than straight of grain. And if you're going to be working on a project, maybe by Annie's handbags, maybe by, or maybe you're doing a quilt that has a scallop edge to it, again, you're gonna wanna do bias. Because the one thing about bias is it's easy to manipulate around curves, whereas straight of grain is not. So if you have a curve or you're doing bag making and you're going to be attaching around a curve, and I know a lot of project bags out there, the by Annie ones that will stand up, have a curve to them, then you're gonna wanna cut by the bias. And I'm not gonna teach how to cut on the bias, but I will say, By Annie's website has a great free video that you can download where she explains how to do that. And there's a lot of YouTube folks out there that'll teach you how to do it also. But I've gone to her site and really like the way she teaches how to cut that bias binding. I have a lot of notes because I want to make sure I don't miss a beat. So the decision next is, are we doing sewing, binding with a machine, where you're going to stitch in the ditch and catch the back? Or are you going to be hand stitching? And that's going to make a decision for you on how wide to cut your strips. If you are, let me see, I got examples. Okay. When we do our machine quilting, I will say, you want to put the binding down and sew with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And the reason mostly for that is the front of your quilt may have a block sitting right here where you've only allowed 1/4 inch seam allowance, right? So if you have a great Ohio Star or something that has points and you don't want to lose those points, you have to ensure that you're staying in that 1/4 inch allowance. So you are going to put your binding on with 1/4 inch. What my recommendation is the first thing you do is sew maybe an inch or two. Stop, pull your project out, fold it over and test it. Because you're going to have a seam line on the back of your quilt. And you want to make sure that project's going to come all the way and cover at least 1/8 of an inch, that seam that you see. So that when you stitch in the ditch, you know you're catching the back of that project. So if you are doing your binding with machine, that's why you need the 2.5 inch, because it will fold around and give you that extra distance in the back to catch with your machine when you stitch in the ditch. When you're doing hand sewing and you're going to stitch it on by hand, you still want to have that really nice look of the same distance front to back. That was my machine example. That same distance front to back. So if you cut it 2 1/4, 2 1/4 is what I'd recommend for that. Then when you fold it over, it's going to be nice and even, and you can run the back of that right up to that thread line. You don't have to extend beyond it. And then that will give you that nice look where the front and the back have the same distance. And the other goal you're trying to do is use your batting to fill, right? So if you're hand sewing and you cut your binding 2.5 inch and you wrap it to the back to that thread line, you're going to leave a little slack of fabric here and your binding won't be nice and full. Does that make sense? Good. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Even online, if you need to shout out with a question, Eddie will let me know you've got something going on that you'd like to know. So when I'm cutting my bindings, that's another big deal. Try my example. Here we go. Sometimes when you cut your fabric, and I don't know if you can see perfectly, but this goes, whoops, and it's usually when you're cutting over a folded fabric that it's not perfectly straight. It'll get a little bump to this side or an indent on the other side. You may not have a nice 2.5 or 2 1/4 inch cut. This is the one time I'm going to give a great shout out to AccuQuilt. I have an AccuQuilt cutting machine and I do all my bindings. I cut on that machine because I know I can layer fabrics. I can have a fold in the fabric and it's still going to cut it perfectly straight. I'm not going to run into having, boy, if you came to my house and saw some of my, I'm just going to try it this time. I say to myself, I'll let my hands walk up the ruler while I'm doing it. It won't happen this time. And every time I get that little bump in the fabric where I ran over a fold. So if you have a AccuQuilt machine, it is well worth the 10 minutes to set it up to make sure that your bindings are going to be really wonderful and solid. Also, another good question is pressing. And this is something I learned recently. When you're pressing for your binding, this is going to be just normal that you go through and you press and you have a nice crease. And you just go along and you have a really nice crease. And it gives you a great piece of fabric to work with. We love that. You do this when you have cut your fabric straight of grain. When you cut on the bias, If you press your fabric and you have too tight of a crease, then your fabric is not going to give you that fold or that bend in a curve that you're trying to go around. So when you are doing bias, it is a better idea for maybe to come around and finger press or do something where maybe you can see it, but you haven't given it a sharp press, because you want that fabric to be malleable and you want to be able to get around that curve. And it's just going to make a big difference in getting it folded over and getting it accurate. So bias, finger press, straight grain, iron press. Okay? Once you put all those strips together, and maybe sometimes on your quilt you have 320 inches of binding, and you've got it in a pile sitting in front of you, and you're getting ready to sew it to a quilt. You really want to have some type of control over that. This is a trick that I found. Okay, many of you guys have this. This is just a thread stand. That thread stand, and I said this in the morning group, at Issaquah Sew Novak, I bet we made all our good customers buy. I bet we made you all buy one of these, because this was our savior for how we sew with metallic thread. But now it is also very helpful to do with our binding, because now this is just a gel roll, it's not a prepped binding, but I took a toilet paper roll and you wrap all your binding around the toilet paper roll and you slide it onto here, and then you're able to pull your binding as you need it. And you don't have miles of binding behind you turning in knots and getting all discombobulated. This is just a nice way to tame your binding strips. And we do have these for sale, but hopefully you all have one of these at home. And that will help you with getting your binding all organized to put on your quilt. So I did say go ahead and sew 1 to 2 inches and make sure that you test it before you continue on. Oh, I went and made it. Okay. We need a close-up on this for certain. This is a tip. I love to take a class, and I always say if I can come away from a class learning one thing, it's worth every bit of money I spent on it. Where's my corner? Here's my corner. So let's say I'm sewing along and putting my binding on, and I'm coming up to the corner. Here's the tip of the week. You always stop 1/4 of an inch before you get to the end. And this purple thing, and there's another tool we've all told you need to own, the purple thing. It's a 3-in-1 tool. It's your stiletto. It's your 1/4 inch. That's a perfect 1/4 inch. And it also will let you put ribbon through here so you can pull this through bags or when you need to get that through a project. So this is a great 3-in-1 tool. But I will mark my binding. I'll go right up to the edge of the fabric and put a little mark so I know exactly where I'm going to stop my machine when I'm sewing. I'm going to come right up to this line and stop. I pivot my fabric. Let's see if you can see it. And I sew a diagonal right off to the corner. And that just helps in the folding process. If you don't do this step with the diagonal, you'll be fine. But this is the way that I was taught to do it. Come right up to the 1/4 inch before the end and then sew off at a diagonal. Now to do our miter turn, this is where the news was new to me. We all know to fold straight up and then bring the fabric back down. And now here's the tip that I learned. When you fold your fabric back down, you are going to leave a scant of fabric still at the top, just a scant. You don't perfectly align it with your quilt. The reason being is you want, when you turn your miter around, to capture the bulk of the fabric going around. And that little scant of fabric that we left here is going to take that into consideration, and you're not going to fight that mitered corner. Okay? Now, when I'm turning that mitered corner, I learned another tip. And let's say I've sewn this all down. I go to my ironing board, I'm gonna press my fabric, right? So that I've got this all ready to go and turn over. When I'm turning my mitered binding around, there is, and I'm trying to get in so you can see this as best as possible. There is a logical way your brain wants to do this. You see, I'm gonna make that, you got a good focus on it. You see that one is under and one is over. When you turn it, you just see that. And your brain wants to follow that direction. We're under and then over. That's absolutely wrong. So counterintuitive. The one that is over, okay, is that making sense? The one that is on top is the first one to fold over. It's the first one to fold over. The one that is on the bottom is the second one to fold over. And I want you to see what the goal is that you have a mitered corner that is nice and flat. It's not going to be bulky or ball up on you. And so you think to yourself, I'm going to do the opposite. It's really counterintuitive. The one that's on top folds over first. The one that's under folds over second. And then it's going to come around to the back and they're going to meet together nicely because they're not rolling over each other and fighting that. That was my great win of a tip that I had no idea. And now I know. And now you know too. I'm sharing it all. Making sure you know it all. Okay. So, those are some tips I know about applying your traditional binding. Let's talk about something that's a little non-traditional, or different, or unique, or fun, or colorful. Let's talk about putting a flange in our binding. If you look here, I have blue and there's an accent pink that's coming through. And so when you're doing a flange, this is so narrow, you really want to be as exact as possible so that it doesn't look wide. And there is one way to do this. I'm going to show you. I'll leave this right here so everybody online can see this too. You cut 2 pieces of fabric. The piece that is your colorful flange, you cut at 1.5 inches. The piece that is this dark accent, you cut 1.25 inches. When you're finished, you have a piece when sewn together, there's your 2.5 inch strip of fabric. And when I fold it and press it, I'm going to get a really nice even flange to go around my binding, okay? If you like your flange larger, then you're going to cut this piece larger, the piece that is actually the flange. So if you want to have it, at 1.5 inches, you can do that too, and you're just going to get a little bit larger piece. Now, I like to work in this ratio because when you stitch it down, you actually stitch it to the back of the fabric. So you go to the back of your fabric, this is the back of my quilt, and I start to stitch it down like this. And when I go to roll it around, it is going to bring me all the way to the front of the quilt, right? And place the flange where you can see it, and then I stitch in the ditch along here. And it's a nice way to hide your stitch. You do have to be mindful of what you have for top thread and what you have to match the back, what's in your bobbin, because there is a chance you're not going to perfectly hit the ditch in the back. And we always match our thread for the front. But one thing I want to tell you is, see how this curls up a little bit? If you come out wider, maybe you want more of an accent. That's good. But what I call that is a crumb catcher. Because you're stitching in the ditch, this is loose. And so when I only have like maybe 1/8 of an inch going around here, that's really great. But if I have a full 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch or make my flange larger, then it's a place for potato chips and popcorn and anything, crackers, Ritz, you name it, they all can get in the crumb catcher. But this is such a nice accent for any type of a quilt. And the other nice thing is sometimes when you're finished a quilt and you go to cut your binding, you're a little shy. You maybe don't have enough fabric to cut all the binding you need for your quilt. This will help because you're cutting this strip smaller. You're only cutting this dark blue strip I have here at 1.5 inches instead of 2.5. So you really can save yourself by letting that flange absorb the rest of that. So it's a way to help you when you've run shy of fabric and you don't know what to do. That's flange binding. Let me teach you some tricks about joining your strips. Let's come here. When you're going to prep your binding, you take your 2 pieces of fabric and we're going to put them together like this. See that shape? Right sides together like this. And I'm going to sew from this corner to that corner. And when I do that, it is going to allow me to have, when I open it up, one nice continuous strip. When you are on this side, you're going to cut this 1/4 inch from the seam line, just 1/4 inch, and you press your seam open. If you press it to one side or the other, you're creating bulk in your binding. So make sure you press those seams open. Now, when you're sewing this and you go to your sewing machine and you say, I'm just not sure, what corner did Mo say I sew it to? Here's the trick. This is a pair of pants, right? Look at this. It's a little pair of pants. You would never sew in the crotch. So see how that works? You would never. So, and that will direct you which corner to corner are you going in. That little thought have saved me so many times so that I don't accidentally sew in the wrong direction. But that's how you'll make your continuous binding strips. I lost my nose.
You pulled it up in your right table runner.
Oh. When I am doing my binding and I'm folding it over, I like to press so that I know I'm getting all my fabric pushed out to the outside. When I fold it over, where's my example? There's a few things I can do to make sure that when I stitch in the ditch, it's not going to get out of my way or that I'm going to miss a segment. How do I get this folded over so it's going to stay exactly where it needs to go? So one product that I love, and now this is where I'm going to get random. Wonder Clips. Wonder Clips are great because do you see that bow and that bend in them? That bow is meant to be on the front of the quilt. The flat part is meant to hold down the back. So when you're putting a Wonder Clip on, and you don't have to clip your whole quilt. You can clip like maybe the first run of it. You don't have to own 300 Wonder Clips. But you definitely need to space them apart to hold your project in place. And then you can go around. There are Wonder Clips that are wide, and there's Wonder Clips that are very narrow, and sometimes those little tiny ones are very helpful in your mitered corners. That's one way to prep your binding to go to the machine and sew. This is another way that I do. This is the Mo method. This is called, it's made by Dritz, and it's called wash away tape. And it is sticky on both sides and irons in place. And then when you wash your quilt, it's going to wash away. It's just made out of starch, like our embroidery stabilizer. And so it has a paper backing. So what I do is I go ahead on my project and I get above the stitch line and I will run a piece of tape above the stitch line. And then you pull the paper off and you fold your fabric around and you iron it in place. Now I don't have to pin I don't have to wonder clip. I don't have to do anything because it's going to stay exactly where I pressed it down. And so I use this a lot because when I'm sewing, I sew like Jenny Doan, I sewed my pedal all the way to the floor. And I just ripped through my quilts. And now I don't have to stop and pull, pins and clips and things out as I go because it's all secured with the Wonder Tape. So this is a great product to have. And then I've also heard that people like to glue. They'll use fabric glue to put it down. I've never used fabric glue, but I'm gonna throw it out there because when I was researching all of this, fabric glue didn't come up. No, I feel like I've just overwhelmed you with so much information, but one thing we've talked about amongst ourselves this morning and this afternoon is possibly we need a binding class and let everybody come in and make a little sample they can take home so they have samples. Because you can tell, I did take a class and I've written on the back of all my samples. So all these things that I learned about binding, I wrote on the fabric, and now this can sit out in a stash. And if I ever need a reminder, I can pull this out and read, oh yeah, this is by machine. I need to do this type of things. So, maybe we'll do that moving forward and have a class here in the shop. That would be a lot of fun. I love doing classes with y'all. I'm looking across our table of goodies that we're selling. And I did want to highlight this. This is something I take to retreat a lot. We have circles and we have magnetic pin cushions at home. This is a slap band that goes around your wrist. And sometimes when you're at retreat, this might be something nice to have on the table because it's small, or on your wrist, however, wherever you want to put it. But I usually have it near my machine, so while I'm sewing, there is somewhere I can cast my pins off to, and they're not going to roll off the table or onto the floor. So this is magnetic pin cushion. All right, I believe it's time for us to do prizes.
Okay, why don't we say goodbye to our virtual audience?
Oh, let me tell the virtual audience something before we go.
Okay.
Yeah, this is really awesome because I know Eddie wants you to know this. Eddie has been doing a lot of really wonderful work on our website. And one of the things he wants to do is feature the work we do here. So when we come to SewTime and we're taking pictures of our show and tell, or customers come in and share a project with us, we're capturing photos. And Eddie is going to start populating our website with a gallery that is going to show some of these examples of our work. He's really going to be respectful of space, and so he'll probably crop you out of the picture because we don't have the approval from everybody to do show your face all over online. But he really does want to start sharing with the community all the work that you do. So we're going to be looking for that really soon. He's had some marketers working on the website, and we're going to put together a segment that's going to be a gallery. So I wanted all of you virtually at home to know that, as well as everyone here, because that's going to be a fun place to go look to get inspired with ideas.
There's a question up there. Thumbs up your sewing machine.
So is that glue?
The Wonder Tape. The Wonder Tape.
Does
The Wonder Tape. Oh, that is such a good question, and I thank you for asking that.
By Liz Doyle.
Liz Doyle, thanks for asking. Let's come in close. Can you do the close-up?
Oh, yes, we can do it. We still have it.
Yay. When I'm sewing my quilt and I can see my stitch line on the back, I'm going to run this right up to the stitch line. That's my stitch line. My Wonder Tape goes above it. Because when I stitch in the ditch, I'm sewing directly back on that stitch line, right? So my Wonder Tape is above that line, and that way I know I'm not going through Wonder Tape when I come back. This Wonder Tape is only 1/4 of an inch wide, and so it accommodates all of that because you've done a 1/4 inch stitch. So the tape goes above your sew line. Very good question. Thanks for asking, Liz. Okay.
Okay, so why don't we all just say goodbye to the virtual audience. Bye, virtual audience.
Bye.
And we look forward to seeing you in April. Okay, bye for now.
Let me get Karen. Karen's got the prize.